In the introduction of this book, written by the author, it is mentioned that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revolutionized the spiritual and social sensibility of 16th century India. Prior to this reformation, a clear majority of the population had been gradually moving away from authentic Vedic religion. Brahminical deviations proliferated. Tantric Buddhists and other Hindu heterodoxies were increasing in popularity. Shakta worshippers and Avaduta ascetics roamed the countryside. Nava Nyaya, the new science of logic from Mithila, was the predominant course of study, and the ever-present Muslim antagonism exacerbated the situation. In the midst of this confusion, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revived the natural spiritual inclination of the people by revealing the often concealed Vedic truth that the holy name of Krishna is both the means and the goal of spiritual enlightenment. The details of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life and teachings and the renaissance that ensued have been elaborately explored by many writers and scholars. However, it is not widely known that a second renaissance began shortly after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu completed his earthly pastimes, one which may be seen as the natural consequence of all that he had imparted. While he had broken open the storehouse of love of God, and while his 6 Goswamis had poured that love into tangible vessels by writing books, the world would not have been able to drink deep had Srinivasacharya and Narottam Das Thakur not taken those vessels and distributed them across the Indian subcontinent. Srinivas and Narottam were the crown jewels of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It is hard to believe that no one has presented the lives of these 3 notable personalities in the English language. While it is true that D.C. Sen wrote about them in the 1930s, he did so in a cursory form, and only Ramakanta Chakravarti has written about them since, also in an all too abbreviated fashion. This reticence is surprising, for Srinivas and Narottam were responsible for disseminating the esoteric message of Sri Chaitanya to all parts of India, which unquestionably necessitated a monumental effort. The chief resource books used to write this book are as follows: Bhakti Ratnakar by Narahari Chakravarti, Narottam Vilas by Narahari Chakravarti, Prema Vilas by Nityananda Das, and Karnananda by Yadunandan Thakur.